Hey there, in this video I want to show you one of my favorite ways to add more feel to your leads and solos. And I'm going to show it to you at 3 different levels. So we'll have a level 1, which will be the easiest, level 2, which is going to be kind of medium, and then level 3, which is going to be the most challenging. The really cool thing about this though is that level 1 doesn't become irrelevant once you learn how to do level 2 and level 3. All versions of this technique are totally viable and something that I personally use all the time in my playing. So I'm not actually sure what the official name of this technique is, but for the sake of this video, we're just gonna call it the semitone slide. We could also call it the semitone squiggle or the semitone shimmy. I don't know, it's up to you. You guys let me know in the comments which one you like the best. In its most simple form, the technique is gonna look like this. So if we play this D note here, the 5th fret of the A string, and we play that note, the whole idea here is just sliding up to the next fret. Seems pretty simple, right? So playing that note, and then sliding that finger up while the note is still ringing out. So I'm only picking first time. We also need to learn how to do it in the other direction. So if we start on this note, let's say, same thing, moving nice and quick, just like that. All right, now that that's out of the way, we can get on to level 1 of our semitone slide here. And we're only really making one change from the basic thing that we learned so far. And all that is when you play that first note, you need to move almost immediately. And this really is something where you have to practice it to get the timing down properly. But the idea is you want to be doing something like this. Okay? So you can see I'm picking on that note still, and sliding up to the next note, but I'm doing it in one motion. So it's going like this. And if I were to go backwards, and the way you can start applying this, and this is how I use it all the time, literally almost every single time that I'm improvising or soloing, is to start on a note that is outside of the scale that you're used to. So one semitone off the scale that you know how to play. So if we were to take the regular A minor pentatonic, right, that we like to use all the time, what we can do is we can start on a note that's next to a note from that scale. So for example, if I did start on this note, and I know that these 2 notes are safe, right? In the scale, if I started here, I could do, right? Something like that. I could do it here. You can play around with it and try it in any spot. The whole idea is because the ear is not being drawn to the first note, it's kind of always pulling to the correct note. It doesn't matter that that note is not in the key or not a part of the scale because the listeners, their brain is not even really registering it, right? You can do the exact same thing falling back to a note. Right there, we were just climbing up to the correct note. We can do, right, fall back into a note in the scale, so. Same thing, we can do any one. One huge tip I have for you here is to actually use the movement of your hand rather than the movement of your fingers when you're doing this. So what you'll notice is you'll see my entire hand shifts whichever direction I'm going. It's not just one finger that I'm moving. So I'm actually keeping my finger pretty much totally static as I'm doing this. And you'll see the whole hand goes, right? Okay, let's move on to level 2. So for this one, we're gonna combine moving up and moving down. We're gonna move up and down all in one quick movement. This is something that is definitely gonna be a little bit more challenging. Even if you're an intermediate player, this one might be a little bit tough. But what we are gonna do, let's go right from, again, we're in that A minor pentatonic position. Let's go from this note right here, so 7th fret of the G string. And our goal with this, I like to use my third finger, my ring finger for this. You can use any finger that you feel comfortable with, and eventually you should learn to do it with all your fingers. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick once, we're gonna slide up, and back down. And you can hear every time I cross that fret, I'm losing some momentum, right? Some sustain on that note. The goal is to keep the sustain from that first pick by the time you arrive back. Now, the actual technique at full speed is gonna look like this. Okay, I know that seems crazy fast, but again, I'm just moving my hand, just shifting my hand up. So it's not coming from my finger moving like this, I'm not doing that. It's my actual hand, so. Just like that. Now, if I were to add this into a little pentatonic run, let's even add our level 1 technique in there as well. It would sound like this. And because you're starting and ending on a note that is from within the scale, you can actually kind of do this at any point. So I can put it here, do it here. Now, if you're able to grasp that, there is something really cool that I can show you. And this is something that I first heard from Mateus Assato. I'm sure tons of other guitar players have done it, but that's when it first kind of stood out to me as something that I wanted to learn. And that is turning this into a double stop. And I like to do this in a very specific spot inside of this scale, which is right here on these two notes, 7th fret, those two notes from the pentatonic scale right there, right? And all we're gonna do is we're gonna do both of these notes at the same time. I actually prefer to do this with my pinky. I have an issue where I have no feeling in this finger, so it sometimes feels really weird when I do certain things. So I use my pinky, but if I play those two notes together, I can actually do something like that. Right? Now, something else that's gonna really help you with this technique is applying even pressure the entire time with your finger that is fretting the string. So I think naturally a lot of guitar players, when they're doing this, they're probably going to either push harder when they start making that move, harder down on the string, or they're not gonna be pushing hard enough, they're gonna kind of loosen up a little bit. The key is to apply consistent pressure the whole time, and that's what's gonna keep that sustain going, right? I know you have to move very quickly to make this happen, but again, the actual downward pressure from the fingers just always stays the same. It never changes. All right, so we've arrived at level 3 of this technique, and I'm gonna warn you, this is pretty tough and challenging to get it to sound really good, but it is very, very cool. Now, this is something I actually learned from Chris Buck watching one of his videos. I'm sure other players have done it in the past, but that's where I saw it, and then I copied it from him. And what we're gonna do is we are going to bend a note. Okay, it can be a full, like a whole step bend, it can be a half step, it doesn't really matter that much, but at the top of the bend, we're gonna add the squiggle as we're falling back down on the bend. So the actual bend, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just something like this. Okay, and what we're gonna do is at the top of our bend, we're gonna add that slide up down, and then we're gonna bring it down, okay, in one big motion. It's gonna be hard to show you slowly, but basically we go up, like that. And when you add it into a lick or some other notes, it starts to sound really cool. So again, the application of this is pretty hard because essentially what's happening is when you are pushing up on that string, depending on the string gauges that you use, I use 9s, but when you push up on that string, you're gonna be applying more pressure than you need to do the squiggle. So because you're pushing up, and you need to move this way at the same time, when you go to move, you're naturally gonna let that string back down. So we're kind of relieving that pressure as we're moving, and that's why it falls back down like that. If I tried, I've never done this, but if I tried to keep it up, it kind of sounds weird, right? It's gonna fall off as soon as I do that squiggle. You kind of can't keep the pressure up there, so we let it fall back down at the same time as the squiggle. So what ends up happening is we end up going up to the note that we're bending to, then we do the squiggle, so it actually goes a little further than that note, but then as we're coming back down, we kind of do a full climb back down to to that starting note. Now, whenever I bust out this technique, I'm usually doing it in that spot in whatever key that I'm in, but you can totally do this anywhere that you're gonna do a bend. Anytime you wanna bend, you can add in that little squiggle. It's not easy to do. And again, you're bending and you're moving that whole hand to get that squiggle out, right? Again, that whole hand is gonna shake. All right, so as you can see, all three difficulty levels of this technique are totally usable. Even if you know all three, you're still gonna find yourself using level 1 and level 2. As far as what's next, I have a video that covers a whole bunch of different lead guitar techniques that you can add to your playing. I think this is actually one of them. So if you wanna check it out, I'm gonna put that video up in the middle of the screen for you now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.